Alright, welcome back to the Grappling Hook tutorial series that we are making here in Construct 3. In the last video, we set up a level for our player to roam around in. We might have to make some adjustments in positioning later on, but that's fine. Starting with this video, everything else is going to be about setting up the grappling mechanic. And the way that I have that set up to work is I want our player to launch a target, and then we can build the grappling system around that target. And the way we are going to launch the target is with a touch or a click on our mouse. And it's really going to be a mouse input on our desktop because we don't have controls for the player set up for a mobile device. But instead of using a mouse object, we can use the touch object, and it does a lot of the same things that the mouse object can do. So let's go ahead and insert that touch object. Double click anywhere on the layout and scroll down towards the bottom. Under input, we have touch. So let's insert that, and it's over here in our project panel. I'm going to move that touch object into the input folder. Make sure our objects layer is highlighted, and let's create that grapple target. So double click and let's select sprite, and we can insert that. We can insert it anywhere. I'm going to put it off to the left side over here. And I'm going to go into resize and make this 5 by 5, and I'll zoom in a little, and I'm going to get me a gray, kind of a brighter gray, so it looks a little more metallic. And then with the pencil tool, I'm going to make a plus in the middle of our box here, and then just fill it in like that. So it's more like a diamond shape. And then with just a plain black color, I'm going to put that right in the middle. And then get our origin point tool, and I'm going to hit 5 on a number pad on the keyboard. That'll put it in the middle, or you can come up here and quick assign it to the middle. Exit out of that. Let's rename that obj underscore grap target. GRAP as short for grappling, and that's going to be our grap target. I'm going to delete that off of this layout. And then over here in the project panel, I'm going to move our new object into the obj folder. Select our grappling target. It brings it up in the properties over here, and we can go into edit behaviors. Let's add a new behavior and give it the bullet behavior. And because there is no instance of it in the layout, I don't have access to the behaviors of the bullet. But I don't want it on the layout that we play the game on. So we're going to create a layout specifically for putting objects on that need to load with the game. Come over here to our layouts folder, right click and add a layout. And we're going to want to take care of those objects that we put in this layout, so we'll need an event sheet. So add an event sheet, and I'm going to rename this. I'm just going to call it meta. Someday I'm going to come up with a better name for it. So I'm going to drag an instance of that target onto our meta layout, and then our event sheet 2, I'm going to rename that meta as well. If you notice, I capitalized our layout and lowercased our event sheet just for organization purposes. So I'm going to open up this event sheet and add an event, go to System, and on Start of Layout, let's add an action, get our grappling object, the target, and type in destroy. So that way, the grappling target object will load with the game, so it'll be there. But as soon as the game loads, we can destroy it. But we really just want to make sure that we get all of this information loaded into the game. So let's go ahead and set that up. Make sure that the grappling target object is selected. And in the properties, let's change the speed to 800. I want it to go pretty quick. Acceleration, gravity, 0. Make sure set angle is unticked, and we're going to enable and disable this in the code, so we don't need it to be enabled starting out. all the values are 0 or nothing, except for speed, which is 800. Now let's go back over to the layout. Now the idea of when this target is launched, I want it to launch from where the player is located. So if our player is here and we launch it, I want the target to shoot from the player to whatever angle we set it up as. And if our player is over here and I shoot it this way, I still want it to originate from the player and shoot outwards. Let's go into our player object. We have the origin point set up at the bottom of all of our animations. And that's because the origin point references where each frame of all of these animations is located. And as long as we have these three all in the same spot, our player won't jump around the screen when it changes animations. But if I reference this origin point for the target, then the target's going to shoot from his feet. And I don't want it to shoot from his feet. I want it to shoot somewhere in the middle of his body as if it's coming from his hand. So let's create a new image point over here in this panel. Let's right click and add a new image point. And I just want to move it to, let's say right about there looks good. So the X value of 10, Y value of 16. And then I'm going to right click on that image point in this panel and say apply to all animations. So now we have created a new image point in all of our animations, and it's in the same spot in all of the frames, even in our player swing, which I want it to be in a different spot. So our origin point for our swing animation is not at the bottom, it's at his hand. There's a reason for that. We will discuss that later on. And the image point, I want the target to shoot from this area, so I'm going to put it right where his wrist is. So there's the origin point right in the middle of his hand, and there is our image point 1. Let's exit out of that, and let's hop on over to the event sheet, and let's add an event. Let's go into our input folder and grab that touch object that we added. And I want to know when we are touching the screen, or in our case, when we first click anywhere on the screen. So down here under the touch category, we have on any touch start. So anytime I push the button down on the mouse, it's going to register that the touch has started. Let's hit next. And when we do click on the screen, I want to create that grappling target. So add an action, go into system, and let's type in create object, and that object is going to be the target. Hit OK. The layer is going to be the objects layer, and if you're working with the free version, you have the background layer with the background tiles on it, and you'll have one other layer with everything else that we create. So put this on that top layer if you have the free version. And our X is going to be that image point that we just set up. And that image point is on our player. So let's type in our player, obj player dot image point X, because we're looking for the X value here. And in parentheses, we want to know which image point we're referencing. And that's going to be image point 1. The origin point is image point 0, and then the one we just added is image point 1. So let's go to the Y and do the same thing. obj player dot image point Y, and that image point is 1. So the X and Y coordinate of that image point, which is the middle of his body or where his hand is where we're going to create this target. Okay, let's hit done. Now after we create the target, we want to enable that bullet behavior so that it can fly across the screen. So let's add an action and go grab our target and scroll down to the bullet behaviors, set enabled, and let's change that to enabled. So now we've turned the bullet behavior on. Now let's tell it which direction to go. So add an action, go into our objects, get the target, scroll down to our bullet behaviors, and we want to set the angle of motion. So hit next. So to get which angle we want it to shoot across the screen in, we know that we want it to go towards the direction that we click. You know, if I click over here and our player's over here, we want the bullet to shoot off that direction. If our player is here and we click up here, we want it to shoot from here to there. So we're going to use an expression called angle. So type in angle. And to use the expression angle, we have to give it some information in parentheses. So type the beginning parentheses, and you see this little tooltip come up, and it shows you the angle expression, and in parentheses, x1, y1, x2, y2. So there's two pieces of information we need, the x and y coordinate of two pieces. The x and y1 is going to be the origin in which we start the angle, and x and y2 is going to be the destination, and then construct 3 will calculate the angle between those two coordinates. So our first x and y is going to be our player's image point that we just set up. So start typing in obj player dot image point x, and that's going to be that image point number 1. And then we're going to separate that with a comma, and now we're going to do the y coordinate, which is obj player dot image point y, and that is image point 1. And now it wants the destination. So separate that with a comma, and then we can enter the coordinates of where we clicked or touched. So we're going to use the touch object that we inserted into the game as our reference. So let's get touch.x for the x coordinate, comma, touch.y for the y coordinate, and then end that with the in parentheses. So the angle is going to be angle from the x and y coordinate of our player object's image point to the x and y coordinate of wherever we clicked. Hit done. We can test that. So let's hit play, and we can move around. Our animations look good. I'm going to click, and it shoots that object. It creates it from his midsection and shoots it across the screen at wherever we click. All right. One thing I want to point out, when I click in this direction, he shoots it forward. And if I turn this way and I click this way, he's still shooting it forward. But if I click behind the way he is facing, it looks like he's shooting it out of his backside. I want to take care of that before we get any further. So exit out of that. And the reason I want to do it now is because we can put that in a sub-event of this event. And by making it a sub-event, it makes sure that it only registers what we're about to put in if this is taking place. Click in this empty area of this event to highlight this entire block of code and hit B on the keyboard, and that'll create a sub-event. What I want to do is make it to where if our player, I'm going to put him in our layout here. So if he's facing to our right, and down here you can see the coordinates of my mouse. So the coordinates of our player is up here, and I'm only interested in the X value, which is our left to right value going back and forth. His X value is 160. The X value down here of my mouse is that first number, which is right there. It's 224. So 224 is greater than 160. If I come behind my player, it's now 89, and that is less than 160. So we're going to use the X value as a reference of where we're clicking. And if the coordinate of our mouse click is greater than the number of the player's current X position, then we know to face this way. If it ends up being a less X value than where our player is currently at, then it'll be less than his X value. So we'll know to turn him around. So let's go back to the event sheet, and we want to store the information of where our mouse clicks into a variable. Right click anywhere in the empty space, and let's add a global variable. And let's call this touch position. And there it is up at the top. I want to compare where our player is, where the X value of our player is, with where our mouse clicks. So let's get that information into our variable first. Add an action to this top event here and go into System, and I want to set the value of our touch position to wherever our mouse clicks, and that's going to be touch.x, because I'm only interested in the X position. So whenever we click on the screen, which will trigger this event, it's going to set the coordinate of our mouse click to this variable. Move this up to the very top. So now this touch position variable has our coordinates in it. Let's go compare that. In this sub-event, let's double click on it, go into System, and we want to compare a variable. We want to know if our touch position is less than our player's X position. So I'm actually going to say less than or equal to the X of our player, and that's going to be obj player.x. If we click on this empty gray space next to it, it'll highlight the whole block. We can Control C to copy, Control V to paste, double click into the event, and instead of less or equal to, we'll just say greater than. So up here, if it is less than or equal to the X, we want him facing to the left. And by default, he faces to the right, so we're going to need to mirror him. So let's go grab our player, and we want to set the mirrored to mirrored. So that will turn him around. And then we can hold Control on the keyboard, click and drag a copy down, double click on this, and change this one to not mirrored. Because if the touch position is greater than the player's X, we want him to face to the right. Let's test that out real quick. So we're going along. If I click on this side, he turns around. If I click back on this side, he turns around. If I start facing this way, click that way. Okay, looks like it's working pretty good. We can get him to walk backwards, kind of a moonwalk. We'll see if we want to do anything about that a little bit later. We might not need to. Okay, let's go over to the layout. I want to create something for our grapple target to latch onto. And I don't want it to be the floor collision. I want the grapple to have a different effect when it comes in contact with the floor. I want to create something that is specific to latching onto for the grapple target. Make sure that we're on the collisions layer and double click on the layout and go down to sprites, and we can insert that wherever. And I'm going to resize mine to 32 by 32. For our origin, let's make that, I'm going to put mine in the top left corner, and then grab the paint bucket, and I'm going to find me a nice blue color. You can make yours whatever color you want. So I'm going to fill that in, exit out of it, and then let's rename this. This is also going to be a collision, so I'm going to start it off with collision underscore. This is for our target, so I'm just going to say collision underscore target. Move that down here close to our player, somewhere right about there, and go into our event sheet, and we can add a new event. And let's go get our grappling target. I want to know when it has collided with that new collision we just made. So on collision with another object, and that object is going to be our collision target. Hit OK, we're done. So the first thing I want to happen is I want this to disable. I want it to stop moving. And to get it to stop moving, we take away the bullet behavior. So down here, let's add an action and go grab that grappling target. Scroll down to bullet behavior, set enable, and make sure it says disabled. Let's play that. And I'll shoot at it, and it stops. And if I shoot around it, it just keeps going through space. So we can just shoot at this all day long, and we make just hundreds of these. Okay, so that works. Let's exit out of that, go into our layout, and I just want to set up our level. So if I zoom in, click on the layout, And actually that's the tile. I'm going to lock my tile layer. I don't want that moving right now. So make sure you click on the layout itself, not on anything. I'm going to go over here to our grid. I'm going to change it from 32 to 16 by 16. I can take these red floor collisions and move them up just half of the way. And then we can take this little guy, put him in there, move him up one, and stretch him out. And if we click on the collision target object in the project panel, bring it up in the properties, we can come over here and change the opacity. I'm going to go back down to 40% so we can see through it. And I'm going to do that to every ledge that we've created. Make sure we have this floor covers the top half, and then we can just drag out a copy and make sure the bottom half of each ledge has one of these blue collision targets on it. Okay, let's go over here to our collision target again, make sure it is highlighted. We can scroll down to the bottom and uncheck initially visible. That way it won't show up inside the game when it is loaded. We can test that real quick. None of our collisions show up and our collision is still there. Our target is sticking to it, and you see it goes through the floor part and is attaching to the collision underneath because we have it set up to not attach to the floor collision. If I click up here, it just goes right through it. Okay, let's exit out of that. All right, I'm going to move the collision target into my meta folder. So we should have these three objects in the meta folder, or if you have the free version, everything's just going to be in this one folder, and that's fine. I'm going to create a new object, double click on the layout, and go to our sprite, insert it off here to the side, and let's go into resize, and I'm going to set the width to 32 pixels, and the height is just going to be 1 pixel. Hit OK, and that gives us just this pretty small little bar. I'm going to get the origin tool and move it to the top left, and the paint bucket tool, and I'm going to find me a brown that I like. So these are the hue, saturation, and luminance values I'm going to go with. You can make yours any color you want. This is going to be the grappling vine that our player hangs from. You'll see this on screen. Okay, let's exit out of that, and I'm going to rename this obj underscore grap vine. And that just indicates that this is the rope or vine that the player hangs on. We can head back over to our event sheet, and on our collision with the target event, I'm going to add an action to that. I'm going to grab our grappling vine, and I want to set the position. But what we can do here is set the position to another object. And this just makes it easier on us because we can pick the object we want it to go to. Set position to another object, and that object is going to be our grappling target. And the image point is 0 because our grappling target only has the one origin point, which is 0. So hit done. Okay, let's test that out. And now, once we make contact with the target collision, it changes the position of our grappling vine because you see these targets are still here, but when I make a new one, it changes the position of our vine. One last thing I want to do is set up the remaining animations we have for our player. So let's go into our OBJ player. I want to add another animation. So I'm going to right click and add an animation. We have two that I want to import, and they're both single frame, so we can import them from a file. So let's click on this folder icon up here, and the one I want is animation grapple idle. Let's open that, and we can set this up the same way we did the others with the origin point at his feet, the bottom middle. We want to make sure our collision box is set to the bounding box, and then we can move it in. I'm going to zoom in a little. And it looks like that's a 5. So that should also be a 5. And this will be a 13. So I can change this one to 13 as well. Actually, that needs to go in. Looks like that's going to be 11. And then back on our origin point, we need to add an image point. And we will add that to the hand. We will need to reference this point when he is in this animation. This one is our player idle. This one is going to be our player idle while slinging the grappling hook out. Let's go ahead and rename this ANI underscore grap idle. And then I'm going to right click and add another animation and import from a file. And this one is going to be our jump. So any grap jump, open it up, set our origin point to the bottom middle. Let's create a new image point and put it on the hand and get our collision box and right click on one of the nodes, set to bounding box. Move that into, that was 5 and 5 for the X value on both of those nodes. And these were 11 and 11. Rename this ANI underscore grap jump. So now we have a couple of different animations we can work with when the grapple is in play. So if you have the subscription version of Construct 3, you can add subfolders to this panel. If you have the free version, you cannot, and it's not a big deal. It does not affect anything other than just organization. And let's add a subfolder, and I'm going to call this one movement, and I'm going to add another subfolder, and I'm going to call this one grapple. They have to go one at a time into the folder. So I'm going to put these in our movement folder. I'm going to rearrange these idle, run, jump, and swing. And then our idle grapple and our jump grapple into that folder. So now we just have a little bit more organization if we need to come back and change things or look for things. This makes it easier. We can exit out of that. That should get us set up for right now. We have our grapple launching set up and the contact that it makes and creating that vine when it first makes contact. We will continue on this grappling mechanic in the next video. So I'm going to stop this here and I will see you in the next one. And don't forget to save.